News, weather, and sports.
Only one place to go.
KRMS 1150, 97.5 and 103.3.
Welcome back into the program. 75 degrees right now on a gorgeous day at Lake of the Ozarks here in beautiful mid-Missouri. I've been telling my listeners for several weeks now how enthralled I've been and how impressed I've been with the Law and Crime Network, and I'm privileged to have as a guest on the program right now one of the anchors on the show, or on the network. Bob Bianchi joins us. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ruben. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on, and you and I had a chance to talk for a few minutes a couple of days ago when we were setting up the interview, and I have a habit of asking long questions. Some people say sometimes I talk like a lawyer, so I want to try to keep my questions fairly short because I want my listeners to hear from you. But first and foremost, I've been so impressed with the approach that Law and Crime Network takes as someone who has covered trials and is just kind of fascinated by the legal process. This has been tried by other networks in the past. People have tried and have not had success. What was it about the approach from the Law and Crime Network that convinced you wanted to be a part of this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, Dan Abrams is the founder of the network, and he is a talent unto himself as a chief legal correspondent for ABC. And I was doing media on all the big outlets in terms of legal analyzing of things. And this network came along, and they asked me to come on as a guest, and I was wowed right from the beginning. And I'll tell you why, Ruben. It played to my skill set. And what I mean by that is I'm a certified Supreme Court criminal trial attorney. I'm a former assistant prosecutor. I was the head county prosecutor for a number of years. So criminal law is like in my DNA. And what was disconcerting to me when I was doing other media appearances was that it was like lawyers light. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but a lot of them didn't have real courtroom experience, real trial experience. You didn't get a real opportunity to dive deep into the individual legal issues. Unlike the Law and Crime Network, there we are with multiple live trials. You cannot hide, I say, as a lawyer. You can't hide on the Law and Crime Network if you don't have significant trial experience. The people that I'm on the show with have some 30 years of experience, both as prosecutors and defense lawyers, so it's so exhilarating to me when I'm hosting a show to have real professionals that we could do a deep dive and let our audience know, here's what we were doing when we did this. This is the skill set. Here's the nuances. Watch out for this. Here are the legal issues. And a lot of times we're right because, you know what, it sounds unique, Ruben, but on the Law and Crime Network, we've actually done that work. So I think that the audience gets a really great perspective from real pros, from our hosts, all the way through to our guests who are phenomenal guests.
And I'll tell you what, I enjoy the journalistic approach as well. And when you take a look at the roster on Law and Crime Network, there was a great mix, not only of attorneys on both sides with prosecution experience and defense attorney experience, but there was a great mix of just people who are journalists and award-winning journalists and investigative journalists, and then a mix of people who have done a little bit of both, like yourself, Mr. Abrams as well. And I think that really builds the credibility of the network.
Yeah, Ruben, that's a really good point, and that's unique to me, too. I'm not really a journalist. I do a lot of media, but we have some unbelievable journalists that are hosts as well, and I love the way the network pairs the journalistic piece with the real serious skill set of the lawyers, either as guests and or hosts. So you're getting the best of both worlds. And I've been fascinated because, like you said, we've got some great journalists like Brian Ross and Aaron Keller, who's also an attorney as well, and others. And I was just asking Aaron the other day when one of the big verdicts came down in a case that we covered gavel to gavel, and I was like, Aaron, what is it like to cover a case like this? What are the stresses and concerns that you have as a media person who's also a lawyer that we wouldn't get as attorneys? And so the audience gets to listen to such a dynamic and diverse skill set that's there. And like I said, Ruben, we're not just playing old trials and one boring clip to the next boring clip. We're live in each of our trials. And when there's a break, we work with the producers as the attorneys listening to the trial and say, hey, this was a really important segment of the trial. So instead of just playing it all, a lot of which, as you know, is mechanistic and mechanical and technical, and you have to do it as a prosecutor in order to put your case on, but isn't really necessarily sexy, if you will, or sizzling. So we're able to crystallize those clips down, and so that when we have our guests on, we can really do a great analysis for our audience to say, here was a pivotal moment in the trial. So we're live in multiple trials, which is another thing I really like. I got to be honest with you. it can kind of get boring if you're just sitting there like I've seen on other shows where you're just handling one trial and they're just playing clip after clip, as opposed to like yesterday, I was sitting there for 2 hours and we were having breaking news on multiple trials on multiple fronts, so it really challenges you as a host. And I love it, and I think our audience loves it by the reaction we get in our chat rooms.
And I'll tell you what, the presentation, what I really enjoy about it is, and I mentioned this the other day, I've got some experience from covering trials. I would say I probably have maybe a little better knowledge than the average person, but you can still learn so much. And the network feeds both types of audience, people who are kind of law geeks and love the system and love to learn about it, and people who just want to learn the inside. You teach them so much more, but you get a lot out of coverage if you have some background covering it as well. But I love to watch the analysis, for instance, of an opening argument or a closing argument, because we get to peer inside your mind, Bob. We get to hear not only an analysis of why you thought that was a great opening statement, but we hear a little bit about what would have been your strategy, almost like you're armchairing the trial. Here's what I would have done differently. Here's how I think that could have been improved, to little nuances. And I remember a conversation you had with one of your guests recently talking about the defense attorney putting his hands on his client's shoulders. Is that something you would recommend as a defense attorney? To what degree? To kind of humanize that defendant in front of the jury. Little tips and nuances like that you can pick up from watching the coverage, to me, is fascinating.
Yeah, Ruben, and that's why I feel empowered when I have my guests on, because like I was dealing with my main guest that I have on all the time, Gene Rossi, is 30 years at the Department of Justice, close to 1,000 prosecutors that he's trained, hundreds of jury trials, Ann Bremner on the other. I have many, many great guests. And so when we're sitting there, we're breaking down the case. And I don't mean to be disrespectful about this, but, if you're going to go to a brain surgeon, and you're going to have that brain surgery, you don't go to somebody who's really never done it before. But when you're dealing with guys like the people that we have on the show, they can give you all those, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the things that you learn when you're a baby prosecutor and you're moving through your career. You cannot compete with a person that's had 20 and 30 years of trial experience. And by the way, they just weren't people that we have on the show that were just sitting around for 20 or 30 years. They're the best of the best. These people were given authority positions, like, for example, myself being the head prosecutor of a county. We weren't just doing the job in the trenches. We eventually got to a place where we were making policy and the judgment calls on each and every case. So when we have the trials that come in, and you're listening to the analysis that's going on about what we've seen that's worked or what we've seen that hasn't, and I've been fascinated in how different states do different things, and there are some times that we look at it, and sometimes we're very critical, and we blow the lawyer away, like, there's a big mistake, you shouldn't have done that, why did you do this? And yet at other times, like yesterday in the trials we were covering, there was one in particular in a Timothy Jones case. The prosecutor, was a death penalty case, the guy had killed 5 of his children, there was an insanity defense, that did not work. That prosecutor in that case gave what I think is close to the most pristine closing statement in a death penalty. It even moved me, a person who's tried death penalty cases, tried murder cases. So we're able to also congratulate those lawyers that have done that. And, of course, I think to your point that you just mentioned before, if you are a true crime buff, or if you're a law student, or if you're a lawyer that's looking to learn how to try a case, most lawyers don't try cases, but you want to learn, you cannot. I challenge anyone to find a network better than the guests and the hosts that we have at the Long Crime Network. I wish I had that as a baby prosecutor growing up. I would have been watching the channel nonstop to listen to the commentary so that I could have trained myself through the Long Crime Network. But fortunately today, our audience has that with us.
And I'm glad you mentioned the emotion that comes out, because as you mentioned, live coverage, and look, I don't mind telling I don't mind using a name out here. I've been on the Nancy Grace show I think 3 different times, and I got to the point where there were 2 times I declined invitations to come on. And I'll tell you what really got to me was one of the producers on that program before the show was telling me, hey, don't be afraid to spruce things up a little bit, or don't be afraid to embellish. Nancy likes excitement. And I'm thinking, this story we're covering, the human element of it is dramatic enough. It doesn't need any kind of embellishment. You guys cover things straight down the middle, and since you're watching it live, you can see that human element, and you can feel that emotion. A death sentence trial case, a murder case, a case where someone has killed his family or is accused of killing his family, has got enough human drama in it to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I love about the network is you put it down the middle. We are calling it as we see it, and I agree with you completely. Some of these trials, that we are covering, and this is from a seasoned homicide prosecutor, are really gut-wrenching. The drama is all there. It doesn't need to be spruced up or added to. It plays itself out. And I think that when we're presenting it to, our audience, we're trying to, with the perspective of our vast experience that we have there, both journalistically and legally, trying to explain to them where this trial will go in the beginning, or where it should go, and how we would play it out. And then watching as it unfolds, like yesterday when Timothy Jones' verdict came in, I got to be honest with you, I felt like I was in the courtroom on one of my own trials. I was so riveted by what the finding was going to be in the death penalty phase of it. So to your point, there's no need to embellish anything here. We're fun. We have a great time. I think if you watch the show enough, you know that me and my guests always have that gallows humor, if you will. So we try to pepper in a lot of we do this in the real world of trial practice. You just can't be straight down the middle all the time and not give yourself a little bit of a break and a breath, because it's really heavy stuff that we're dealing with.
The case from California that just concluded a couple of days ago, the man who was accused of killing his coworker and his family. I remember hearing one of the anchors on that say that they were shocked by the verdict. Have you seen a trial that stands out yet since you've been on the network that has really surprised you at the end?
That one, Charles Merritt, the McStay family murder case. I've been, I take prosecution. I mean, I'm a defense lawyer now, but I was a prosecutor and the head prosecutor for a long time. It's in my blood, and I do believe that I see sometimes cases that are going on where I'm wondering to myself, is the prosecutor presenting this case because of politics or public perception, or are they doing it because they think it's really the right thing to do and they have the quality of evidence necessary, to secure a conviction? And what I found very troubling about that case, first of all, these are the critiques that you'll hear from us. And this was a case that I thought the judge did a horrible job. The judge limited the defense's arguments about third-party guilt. That is another person that they were pointing the finger to, which I have never seen a judge limit a defense lawyer to point to a credible potential third party that may have done it. And moreover, I'll tell you where the flavor of that case really turned for me. There were 3 DNA profiles that were recovered from this brutal crime scene where these people's skulls were smashed in. It was really horrible. Mom, dad, and 2 kids killed. And they never ran the DNA profiles in the CODIS. That's the DNA match, program. This is a basic investigatory thing. It's basic. It's not brain surgery. And they should have done it. And the only reason they didn't do it was because they had their guy. It is the tunnel vision that I have seen literally myself being out at crime scenes where people say it's this guy with very little evidence, and every other piece of evidence that could potentially contradict that theory is disregarded. And in that case, I found it sickening to me that a prosecutor should have more curiosity, and if you're really convinced that the person sitting there is the right person, then why wouldn't you run valid DNA profiles in that case? So I really began to wonder. That's a death penalty case, Ruben. They're in the penalty phase right now. He may very well get executed, but the most primary thing that you have to do as a prosecutor handling death penalty work, and I've done it, is you have to make sure the person's guilty. You have to absolutely be completely, in my mind, convinced of the guilt of that person. And I don't know. I think that Charles Merritt case is going to come back on appeal because of the manner in which that case was handled.
Dealing with social media in my business, and when we report stories on things that are happening in the courts and different trials, there are so many trials by social media, so many Facebook attorneys out there who will make comments, well, how can he even get bond? I just don't understand this. And, what do you mean these 2 charges were dropped? Who don't know the details of the case. And people so many times want to administer what they consider to be justice out of pure emotion. What is great about a network like the Law and Crime Network is, people who really want to learn and understand can dig deep into the orders from the judge that he gives to the jury before they go back and deliberate. The analysis of that, it can be a valuable learning process and how the legal system actually works. And when I see those types of social media comments, and then I'm able to go home and watch a presentation like we see on Law and Crime Network, I'm so thankful that, no, the system's not perfect. By no means is the system perfect, but our legal system is the closest you'll find to perfect, and it's so great to know that we have got some form of civility in our legal system as opposed to just vigilante justice.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is an advent, as you put it, that you've seen since the social media phase, and it has surprised me as well that when I do my media hits in Law and Crime and or other places, I'm giving a legal explanation of something, and people don't want to hear the law. They have a feeling about a particular case or based upon some things that they read, and it kind of like that tunnel vision I was telling you about with the investigators. Irrespective of the law and irrespective of the facts, they're going to vehemently argue their side of the equation. And, these defendants today, by the way, and clients that I represent right now, you get caught up in that social media thing. I have one right now. Guy's innocent, found not guilty, or whatever, but good luck. You got to Google his name. He's all over the Internet with horrible crimes, so he's living a kind of a sentence that you didn't deal with 10 or 15 years ago. That is the sentence of death by the court of public opinion. And it can be, public opinion can be very brutal. I've given legal analysis on things, and I say something like, well, you have to understand what the jury charges. That's the thing you just mentioned, the instructions that the judge gives to the jury at the end of the case. When I would teach my prosecutors how to prepare a case, the first thing was an indictment. The second thing was the jury charge. You have to know what it is that the judge is going to read to the jury so that you know what it is that you have to prove. But when you bring up the jury charge, sometimes the social media people go off the hook as if I'm the one who created the jury charge. I'm not the one who created it. The courts have created these charges to make sure there's guardrails and there's not vigilante justice, that it's done in a professional way where due process is meted out, and that convictions should only be occurring if they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And that was a standard that I never shied away from as a prosecutor. But today, you see more and more people not willing to give those presumptions of innocence and proof beyond a reasonable doubt a good shake. They just go on pure emotion.
Lawandcrime.com is the website. On there, you can find out where you can view the channel. There are updates online. You can also sign up for trial alerts through the website as well. The website is almost as good as the network itself. Bob Bianchi has been my guest. I greatly appreciate your time, sir. Keep up the excellent work, and thank you so much for the product.
My pleasure, Ruben. Thank you so much.
Quick break. We'll be right back.